Hello lovely people, I'm Debs. Welcome or welcome back to my channel, Raina Reads Stuff. I'm here in the Book Shack. I turned 59 years old in October last year, and at the time I set myself a challenge to read 60 classics before I turned 60. So we're about halfway through, and actually I'm about halfway through the number of books. So I have so far completed 33. And I just thought I'd give you an update on what I've read. And also, I sort of want to check with you that they qualify as classics. So if there's any on here that you would argue with, let me know. And I'll think about what I'm going to do about that. First up was a children's classic. And I read These Happy Golden Years by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This is the final instalment of the Little House on the Prairie series, and I had, over the course of the previous year, read all the others. I think I might have a prequel missing, but I'm not judging series here, I'm judging books. So These Happy Golden Years counted as book one for me. Then I read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, classic novel, classic horror. I'd never read it before and I was really surprised by it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I expected it to be. And my sympathies lay more with the monster. Number three, in June last year, a group of us read Dune by Frank Herbert. And I had a volume with all three of Frank Herbert's Dune trilogy included in it. So for number three, I read the second book in that trilogy, Dune Messiah. Didn't like it as much as the first one, but I will at some point go on to read the third. Classic Russian drama next with Anton Chekhov. I took part in an event called Chekhovember last year and read The Seagull and The Cherry Orchard. One was a reread, one was a new read. I enjoyed both, but I've lumped them together as one because they're both quite short. P.G. Wodehouse is going to feature on this list a couple of times. I'm trying not to do too many because that's just cheating. But Carry On Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, classic humour. Any regulars to this channel will know that I absolutely adore P.G. Wodehouse, and he's going on the list. Number six, by Grand Central Station, I Sat Down and Wept by Elizabeth Smart. Classic American literature. I loved this, and it was very sad. I'll probably read it again, but not until I finish this challenge, and probably a number of other challenges. Classic short stories next with Ernest Hemmingway. I don't think anyone can argue that he is a classic author. I read The Snows of Kilimanjaro, which is a collection of short stories. I did enjoy this. I do like Hemingway's writing style. Next up was another one that surprised me, and that was Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Books, which I've put down as classic children's literature. I thought I knew the story of The Jungle Book. I hadn't actually read this before. It was my copy that I had given to me when I think I was about 8 or 9. So I've had this book for 50 years. It's got to qualify as the longest lasting book on my TBR list, I think. It's not just the story of Mowgli, which surprised me. There are other stories in there, and I loved it. Kurt Vonnegut, my very first Kurt Vonnegut book, comes in at number 9, which was Slaughterhouse 5, which was just I've put that down as a modern classic. It was just so poignant and it was an incredible read. I'm glad I finally got round to it. I read Medea by Euripides as a sort of offshoot of a project that I was taking part in, the Pinheiro project, reading the works of Claudia Pinheiro. There was a particular book where a chorus was involved, and obviously you have the chorus in Medea. Classical Greek play. So that's got to count as a classic. Next up was this. I love the cover of this. Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackery. Now, I had a slow start with this, but then it finally clicked and I got into it and absolutely loved it. I really liked Becky Sharp as a heroine. Talk about social climbing, but thoroughly enjoyed that one. And that was the 11th book I read. Now, the 12th book was a bit of a cheat because actually Alan at Alan's Reads read it. And I followed along in my edition. And he did this in the run up to Christmas. For the 4 weeks of December, he read A Christmas Carol. And I read it along with him. Charles Dickens, it's got to be classic literature. It was a reread for me. And it was a bit of a cheat. But I'm counting it anyway. Because it's my game, basically. That was number 12. Number 13, I read as a buddy read with Gavin from Genre Books, and we read EM Forster's Where Angels Fear to Tread, and I really enjoyed it. Although I didn't like the characters. They weren't very nice. It wasn't that they weren't well written, because I think they were. They just weren't very nice people. George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion was next up. Classic drama. Pretty sure I read this for the Endless Drama Project that Angelia has organised at Read and Reread. That was number 15. No, it wasn't. It was number 14. Number 15 was also classic drama, but this was classic drama that was written other than in English. Carol Chapek, R.U.R. I absolutely loved that. I thought it was brilliant. And then yet another buddy read, and this was a buddy read again with Alan from Alan's Reads. And actually, we both read this. He didn't read it out loud on camera while I went through the print version. We both read this and discussed it. It was a book that I had refused to read at school. And that was Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I am putting this down as a modern classic because everybody else says so. I liked this book. I have no idea why I refused to read it at school. I think it might have been because there weren't any girls in it. I didn't think it was brilliant, but I liked it. Right, this one I am classing as a classic, whether you've heard of it or not. J.L. Carr. I love J.L. Carr. He wrote A Month in the Country. This is a modern classic because it says on the spine of the book it's a Penguin modern classic, and as far as I'm concerned, that works for me. How Steeple Cinderby Wanderers won the FA Cup. And this was just magnificent. It was a book about a tiny village's football team who, as you can tell by the title, went on to win the FA Cup. It was really good fun. A German modern classic next. This is number 18. Irmgard Kern's A Child of All Nations. Very interesting. It was about a family forced to move from Germany before the outset of the Second World War because they could see what was coming, and their journey around Europe trying to stay out of trouble. And then another children's classic at number 19, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, which I'd also never read. I don't know how I've managed to get to my age without reading it, but I did. However, I've read it now and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Holmes is Where the Heart Is was responsible for number 20 on my list so far. I've put this down as classic crime. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of the Four. I really like this. Do I like it as much as The Hound of the Baskervilles? Possibly not, but it comes very close. And then we've got some classical history, and this was a read as part of Historathon 2025. Again, it was a group read. I read Sallust, The Catiline Conspiracy, and then The War of Jugurtha. I found it fascinating. I don't think it was particularly an easy read. Military history isn't not one of my things really, but it was really interesting. And now we get on to the read of the year, Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time. I read volume 1, The Way by Swans. I'm not going to say I found it easy because I didn't. Good grief, can the man go on and on and on. But this is classic French literature. This was book number 22. And if we drop quickly down to book number 26, I also read volume 2, which is In the Shadow of Young Girls in Flower. I have only just started book 3. I'm not sure whether I'm losing interest in Marcel Proust. I'm not sure whether I can continue and read books 3 to 6. I am only a third of the way through. If I don't read them, I don't read them. But if I fancy it, I'll go back to them. So, books number 22 and 23. 22 and 26. In between that, 23, 12 Years a Slave by Solomon Northup, American classic. I thought that was brilliant, really interesting. I then went on to read Their Eyes Were Watching God as a buddy read with Pat from Book Chat with Pat. This is by Zora Neale Hurston. First time I'd read it. Pat used to teach it. The chat we had at the end was really fascinating. I mean, you all know Pat. She brings so much to a discussion about a book. Both of those I think I read during the US's Black History Month. Then we've got another P.G. Wodehouse, Right Ho Jeeves. Sometimes you need to inject a bit of humour into your lists. And those were the ones between those two Proust books. Then, Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov. And this was the members of last year's Ulysses 6 and a few additional members, which was lovely. And we read that over the period of 2 months. It was my first Dostoevsky. I loved it. Russian classic literature. Then we've got a Czech classic, and I buddy read this with John David. The Good Soldier Schweik, Jaroslav Hasek. I think it's safe to say I enjoyed this more than John did. It's persistent, almost slapstick humour with a very serious message behind it. World War One literature about a bumbling oaf of a former soldier who enlists for the Austrian army at the beginning of the First World War. I think John felt it was just too much. It was about 700 pages, I think. It could have done with being shorter, to be honest. Then, this was another surprise. I read this for Dawathon, the Welsh reading event. Event was the word I was looking for. Under Milk Wood by Dylan Thomas. I have previously read Dylan Thomas. I've read some of his poetry, a lot of which I didn't understand at all. I have read, what's it called? Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog. And that's biographical vignettes of him growing up. I loved that. This I thought was fabulous. Really, really enjoyed it, and went on then to watch a production of it that was put together by the BBC, which was fabulous. I think most people I could name who were famous and Welsh were in it. Wuthering Heights, Emily Bronte for March on the Moors, organised by Melinda at, oh, for goodness sake, sorry, Melinda, I've completely forgotten your channel's name. I will find it and link it below. I have not read very much Bronte. I read Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey last year, and this is the only other one I've read, and this was just so fabulous. It was so... It dealt with obsession. It was so powerful. It was so atmospheric and darkly gothic, and I absolutely loved it. This month I have read Willa Cather. I've read O Pioneer, an American classic. I thought I was reading it for spring into adventure, but it wasn't very adventurous. So, but it definitely fits with my 60 before 60 classics. That was book number 31. And the book number 32 was the Book of Marjorie Kemp, and I read this for several reasons. One for Historathon, one for People April, and one for Spring into Adventure. This is the memoirs of an Englishwoman who went off on pilgrimages all over the place and travelled at a time when women really didn't travel, and she went to Jerusalem and Rome and all sorts of places. It's also thought to be the first biography of a woman in English. That was the penultimate book on my list. The final book on my list, book number 33, is Charles Garton, A Verse by R.L. Stevenson. I nicked this from my parents' house. My mother did say I could have it, but there's an inscription in there. It was given to her for her 7th birthday. and that was in 1946. And the instant I started reading this book, I remember all the nostalgia came back from when I read it as a child. I don't think I've read it for about 50 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, there's another couple that I'm partway through. I am almost at the end of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, and I have just started Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea I am reading with Alex, from Alex Unabridged, with buddy reading, and the Around the World in 80 Days is the group read for Spring Into Adventure. I thought I'd read it at the end of April, beginning of March, because Spring Into Adventure runs over those 2 months. So that's it. I'm 33 books in, 27 books to go, partway through 2. I think I'll get my 60 before 60 challenge finished before I turn 60. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, if you disagree with any of these books being classed as classics, please let me know. I think they're classics. They might not be. I mean, what defines a classic? But anyway, thank you for stopping by. It's always lovely to see you. Please pop in again. You're always welcome in the Book Shack. And I will speak to you soon. Bye for now.